The Fires of Vengeance by Evan Winter, the sequel to Rage of Dragons and the second book in the Burning series. I'm very happy to say Orbit has sent me this book early to review here on the channel, and I'm very, very excited to do so. The Fires of Vengeance is highly anticipated for not only me, but my community as a whole. This series has actually caught quite a bit of buzz for how differently it hits, not only for its cultural inspirations, but just the raw passion that really goes into the writing here. The Rage of Dragons, the first book in this series, without getting into spoilers, is an examination of the disease that is anger and rage and vengeance, just having that one-track narrow mind in the protagonist, which is a bit different. It's kind of rare to come across a book that is just unrelentingly, brutally examining what can happen when a character is consumed by the ideas of revenge. And as you can tell from the title of this one, that's continuing here. But where Fires of Vengeance really springboards off from what Rage of Dragons sets up is the Rage of Dragons was an examination of the horrifying brutality of rage, right? Like there's just a lot of that in the pages. Fires of Vengeance is a lot more about the pain and consequences those untracked actions can bring about, because our main protagonist, Tao, he's done some things that are disagreeable, to put it lightly. And in the first book, there was, of course, consequences for his actions, but the real theme of Fires of Vengeance is consequences and pain. I do have some criticisms, though, I do want to get into first and get out of the way here. This book had a bit of a pet peeve of mine for its opening, where essentially it had a previously on the Burning series. I don't enjoy that period. I have read the previous book, I don't need it recapped for me, and it was woven into the text, into the narrative, to try and be like here is a justifiable reason why this person is going over all the major plot points of the last book. I just don't like that. It kind of hits me as like one of those cop shows where it's like, previously on NYPD Blue, and it just goes over it. And the fact that Evan tried to put it into the story just made it feel all the more clunky and immersion breaking. And I was actually a bit afraid that this book was just going to be a continuation of Tao as he was in book one. But I'm very happy to say that while his character is established fantastically in the first book, Tao really begins to develop here and examine himself and have moments of self-reflection, and then the question bubbles to the surface of, can he get over this all-consuming fire within himself, or will it just be the driving force for his entire life and purpose? Now, while Fires of Vengeance does take more time to have some different angles for Tao's story, he's definitely taking on more of a leadership role. He has more to juggle than just what he did in the Rage of Dragons. Evan's breakneck pace, though, is still absolutely the driving force of this story. We just burn, the burning through all these pages with hardly a breath in between, which is kind of the signature for the Rage of Dragons, and it continues on as well. And which actually, with the grander subplots going on, with the grander world exploration going on, I actually would have maybe preferred a bit more of a slower pace, just so I can really experience this absolutely stunning world Evan is crafting. I never felt like I was able to, as a reader, sit back and just look around and enjoy what was being presented to me, and instead it was just go, 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 which is part of the appeal of this series. I'm not really chalking this up as a criticism, it's just like actually a good sign that this world is tantalizing enough for me to be like, wait, hold up, I want to just sit here. No, we're moving, okay, we're moving. Quick note, while we're talking about pacing, there also is a rather long falling action and resolution here after the climax, where we are just kind of with our characters and just experiencing the aftermath, and it is extremely well done, and it's much slower, unlike the rest of the book like I'm talking about. And I think that is quite the nice effect, to have the reader just kind of sprinting and then hitting this wall where now all of a sudden we're just kind of living with the results of Fires of Vengeance. And without getting into any spoilers, I'm being as vague as I can here, it's super effective to have this longer aftermath. I wasn't feeling like as much appreciation for it until I was talking with Murph about it, and she kind of pointed out how effective it was, and I was like, wait a minute, absolutely, you're right. The reason I'm feeling this way is because it's accomplishing what I believe the author set it out to. I actually buddy read this with fellow booktuber Murphy Napier. She got a copy sent her early as well, and we ended up talking about the structure a good bit here, and I had a couple nitpicks with the way way this book was structured. There were a few plot points hit on that it was like, oh, I feel like this is now happening within the narrative because this was something set up and it needs to pay off. And it wasn't really justified why this certain character who's kind of been acting as like a bomb under the table metaphor since the beginning of the book is now coming to a head now, because it just kind of needs to. There wasn't really a whole lot of like build up for it. There's a little bit of that, and the payoff itself in that scene isn't quite as climactic as I wanted it to be. I mean, we have this character who's set up as like wanting revenge on Tao, the revenge machine, and then when those two clash, we're kind of just left with this feeling of to be continued, and I need a little more than that. It just kind of felt like a checkbox moment instead of a deep exploration of the way these two feel between each other, which is what I was looking for, because that's where Mr. Winter shines. Mr. Winter, that's a cool nickname. And I want to actually hit on that here as well. Evan's character work continues to be distinct and unforgiving. He writes passion so effectively. There's a specific scene where a character is looking at Tao and is saying like, you need to get revenge for us. You need to continue your mission. You need to kill them all. And in some other author's hands, worst case scenario, that could feel corny. Best case scenario, it could feel kind of badass. But because of how this character establishment's been done, because of how the character that's within these pages has been proven to us to walk the walk he talks, it does feel badass, but it also almost put a pit in my stomach of, no, please, you've progressed so far. You've done such an incredible job as a character evolving. I feel like this could regress you, and that's a great sign for character stakes being implanted in the reader well, to make me go like, oh, badass, but simultaneously go, no, please, stop, please, no, you don't need to do this, man. That's great. Wonderful sign. There's also another scene where there's someone like, are you sure they're dead? And Tao's like, I killed him, so yeah, they're dead. And the person's like, I believe it then. Because if Tao puts his hands on someone, they're gonna die. And yeah, that is true. And having this so passionate character, as I said, like the theme of the first book was exploring his anger, and this book is now exploring his pain and the consequences. With Evan's ability to capture human emotion and that passion people can feel, it really pays off when Tao finally slows down and begins to contemplate everything. It does actually give us those brief moments where the pacing of the book seems to be relaxing, and then we get to really see how much damage has been done to this man, and it's heartbreaking in a way. I think it's brilliant that Evan has been able to build a character to us who is so intimidating, so scary. Genuinely, it's a protagonist who you're following, and you know how other people view him is this force to be reckoned with. But now when we are alone, we have these moments of silence, and just seeing how much suffering goes on internally there, it's this beautifully tragic portrait. The rest of my criticisms kind of come down to nitpicks. There was one handling of a poisoning that, as far as I'm aware in my medical training, which I have a little bit of, that's not how you help a poisoning. You'd make it worse doing that, significantly worse. But, you know, fantasy authors are going to do that kind of stuff all the time, and maybe this is some magical poison and I just need to get over it. There were a couple setups and payoffs I just didn't have the most immense catharsis with. That one specifically with one character who wants to seek revenge on Tao, specifically, I didn't enjoy the most. And you know, some authors have tics. They kind of just like can't help themselves but write something into their books. You know, Sanderson's going to have his harder magic systems and some modern words slipped in there. George R. R. Martin's going to have terrible descriptions of sex and overly witty characters. Joe Abercrombie is going to have just characters who are constantly smarming off to each other, like in kind of too intelligent ways. Like, people don't talk as intelligent as Joe Abercrombie's characters often talk. Evan Winter's tic is action sequences. Like, there's just so much action here. It's military fantasy, yes, but I would also just like to say it's probably the highest action per page. This is the highest APP of maybe any fantasy book I have ever read. Never gets tiring though, because of how effectively he writes his action. It does work, it does pay off, and you're always going to be gripping the book all the tighter reading it, because this is a book, again, where people are going to die. So prepare for that. We already know that though. We already know from the first book that the Burning series is not afraid to kill off characters. I think a lot of people will go from liking this book to loving it when they reach the section titled Wrath, which there's a lot of sections of this book that have titles that kind of just wonderfully reflect the experience you're about to get into. And again, Evan is intelligent enough and good enough at setting up characters for you as a writer that you can literally just read one of those titles and predict what's going to happen and have, oh shit, come into your head. None of those were huge flaws though, and I would say nearly all of the positives of the Rage of Dragons come through here quite strongly for the Fires of Vengeance as well. I'm feeling a strong 8 out of 10. I quite liked it, and I'm a big fan of the burning. I'm super excited to get to the next one, and Evan, write faster, please. Quick note though, I want to get into not like drama callouts or anything like that, but a note I had for a couple other booktubers who I saw reviewing the first book in the series, Rage of Dragons, where they use specific wording that is not true. And I know that sounds weird to say, but for when you're doing a book review, slight word choices can make a very large difference in whether or not someone's going to spend their money on a book. I saw a couple book reviewers specifically say that Tao's escalation of power within the text was completely unjustified in the Rage of Dragons, and that he was just suddenly stronger, when that is not true. There is justification in the text. Factually, it exists. Now, what you absolutely could say was you did not like how quickly it was done, because it is done rather quickly, but in a understandable way for the world that is set up. But saying there is none is a falsehood. And I understand this can come down to just slight word choices you aren't even thinking about in the moment, or maybe you skim read, which is fine. I personally don't do that, but I understand some book reviewers do, and as long as they tell their audience before they do the book review, that's what they did, all right? But those things matter, because then I've also seen repeated online that like, oh, the Rage of Dragons has a character who completely unjustifiably becomes more powerful, when that is not true. He does, it's just kind of rather quickly handled because of a certain way the magic system exists. And I know this seems like I'm nitpicking, but it's a trend I've seen happen repeatedly with various books, and I want people to just be a little more careful, just a little bit, with the specific word choices they have, because they can make a larger impact, especially if you're dealing with smaller published books, on people picking them up. And, you know, I always encourage people not to skim read if they're going to do a review, but you know, it is what it is. Some people are going to do that. Anyway, guys, that's all I had to say on this one. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all. Peace. And of course, I'd like to record a special shout out to my latest high